I used to believe that silence was a peaceful thing, the quiet of a sleeping house, the hush of a winter morning. I was wrong. True silence is the space between you and the person you love, a chasm so wide not even a shout can cross it. For 15 years, I lived in that silence, believing it was my fault for not speaking loudly enough. I built a life in that quiet, a family, a routine. I thought I was the foundation, the steady, unshakable rock upon which everything stood. But a foundation can't see the termites eating away at its core, and I never would have seen them if I hadn't secretly learned to listen in a language I was never supposed to understand. My name is Kenji, and this is the story of how my marriage ended not with a bang, but with a single whispered sentence in a crowded apartment. It's a story about the sacrifices we make for family and the devastating cost of being taken for granted. I need to warn you, revisiting this is painful. Before we go on this difficult journey with me, please, make sure you're subscribed to Silk Vengeance Stories. Having your support as I tell this story, it means more than you know. It makes feeling this vulnerability feel worth it. My world, for the longest time, had a simple, unwavering center. My daughter, Maya. She was 8 years old, with her mother's sharp eyes and a laugh that could mend any crack in my spirit. Every decision I made, every ounce of effort I poured into my long days, was filtered through the simple question, is this good for Maya? I worked as a foreman for a local construction crew. My hands were permanently stained with grit, my shoulders permanently sore, but I wore that fatigue like a badge of honor. It was the physical proof I was building a future for her. Sloane, my wife, saw my dedication differently. She called it overindulgent. A quiet, dismissive word she'd let slip when I'd come home, exhausted, and still agree to read one more bedtime story or help with a school project she deemed a waste of a weekend. You're going to soften her, Kenji, she'd say, her voice cool and measured from the doorway of Maya's room. The world isn't soft. She needs to learn practicality. That was Sloane's favorite word, practical. It was a wall she built around every conversation, every dream. I met Sloane when I was 25, all rough edges and hopeful heart. She was ambitious, polished, and saw in me a stability she found refreshing. Back then, she'd laugh at my jokes, her hand finding mine under the table. We were a balance. But over the years, the balance shifted. Her career in commercial real estate took off, and my steady, blue-collar paycheck began to feel insufficient. Not in our bank account, but in her eyes. She started managing our finances, not as a partnership, but as a CEO. Let me handle the budget, dear, she'd say, her tablet already glowing with spreadsheets. You just focus on your work. The first time I suggested a family trip to the coast, she presented me with a cost-benefit analysis of the gasoline, lost work hours, and hotel expenses versus the experiential ROI. Maya's hopeful face fell. I never suggested it again. My opinions on anything beyond the texture of drywall or the grade of lumber became irrelevant. I became the practical tool in her life, the reliable mechanic of our home, fixing leaks and assembling furniture, while she designed the blueprint of our existence. The silence began there. It wasn't a loud, angry silence. It was the quiet of a dismissed idea. It was the hush that fell when I started a sentence, and she'd already turned away, her phone pressed to her ear, dealing with a real problem. I felt myself shrinking, becoming a smaller man in my own home. Also, I wouldn't disrupt the perfect cold order Sloane was building around us. For Maya, I told myself, I'm doing this for Maya. She needed a stable home, even if that home was slowly turning into a beautifully furnished cage for her father. It's hard to look back on those moments, the little signs I missed, the pieces of myself I sanded down to fit. If you've ever felt unseen in your own life, let me know in the comments with a simple, I see you. It helps to know I'm not alone in this. My escape, my rebellion, was born in the silence of our garage. It wasn't filled with loud power tools or a rebuilt engine, but with the soft rustle of pages and the low murmur of my voice repeating foreign sounds. After Sloane and Maya were asleep, I would retreat to my old, worn armchair under a single pendant light. There, I opened my gateway to another world, Japanese. It started with my grandfather's things. After he passed, I inherited a small, locked chest. Inside, nestled beside his war medals, was a bundle of letters and a diary, all written in an elegant, impenetrable script. He never spoke of his time in the Pacific, but these pages held his secrets. My curiosity was a quiet, personal flame. I wasn't trying to become fluent. I just wanted to hear his voice one more time, to understand the weight he carried in silence. I used a free language app on my phone, cheap textbooks from secondhand stores, and headphones so Sloan wouldn't hear the repetitive audio lessons. At first, it was just strange symbols and awkward sounds, but gradually, the puzzle pieces started to fit. The graceful kanji characters felt like drawing, a meditation for my work-roughened hands. The polite, structured grammar gave me a sense of order that my own life lacked. This wasn't a hobby Sloan could dismiss as unproductive. It was mine, a sacred space where her judgment couldn't reach. For 8 months, this was my ritual. The garage became my sanctuary, the scent of old paper and motor oil mixing with the sound of a language that felt strangely like home. I progressed from simple greetings to understanding full sentences. I learned about the nuanced levels of respect, the way language could build walls or bridges. I started reading my grandfather's diary, slowly, painstakingly. He wasn't writing about battles. He was writing about the beauty of a cherry blossom tree after a rainstorm, the kindness of a local farmer who shared his meal. He was a homesick young man, not a soldier. In learning his language, I was finally meeting my grandfather. I never told Sloan. I knew exactly how that conversation would go. A raised eyebrow, a sigh of exasperation. What's the practical application for that, Kenji? Are we moving to Tokyo? She would have dissected it into a useless expense of time and mental energy, and the fragile joy I'd built would have crumbled. So I kept it my secret, a tiny, glowing coal of selfhood I nurtured in the dark. I started learning for the past, to connect with a ghost. I had no idea that this secret language, this quiet act of defiance, would soon become the only tool I had to secure my future and protect my daughter. The very walls Sloan was building around us were about to be tested, and the blueprint for their collapse was written in a language she never knew I could read. Staying silent when you want to scream takes a strength I didn't know I had. If you understand that feeling, if you've ever held a part of yourself back just to keep the peace, then you understand this story. Hit that subscribe button. We need to stick together. The change in Sloan was subtle at first, a new undercurrent of energy that crackled around her. She started leaving real estate magazines on the coffee table, their glossy pages filled with images of stark, modern condos with floor-to-ceiling windows. "Just looking," she'd say when she saw me noticing. "It's good to know what's on the market." But the "just looking" quickly evolved into frantic, whispered phone calls in her home office, the door firmly closed. Then, one evening, she laid it out for me. She stood in our living room, a space I'd built a bookshelf for, a room that held our family photos, and declared it stifling and stuck in the past. "We've outgrown this place, Kenji," she said, her tone leaving no room for debate. "It's holding us back. A man in your position should want more." A man in my position. The phrase was a carefully crafted weapon, implying I was underachieving. My quiet contentment was a character flaw. She wanted a penthouse, something with a view, in a building with a concierge and a gym she would never use. It was to be her trophy, the ultimate symbol of her success. My role, as she defined it, was to nod, to appear supportive, and to provide my paychecks for the down payment. Our viewings became a weekly ritual of quiet humiliation. Sloan would glide through these pristine, empty spaces, critiquing the finishings with a jargon-filled vocabulary, while I stood by the window, feeling like a piece of misplaced furniture. She would dismiss my few, hesitant opinions about the quality of the natural light or the storage space with a wave of her hand. "That's an emotional response, Kenji. We need to think about resale value, square foot cost." I was tired of the performances, tired of feeling my home was never good enough, tired of seeing the confused look in Maya's eyes when we talked about moving away from the only house she'd ever known. I was ready to surrender, to just let the tide of Sloane's ambition carry us wherever it was going. And then she found the listing. She burst into the garage that night, shattering my sanctuary. Her eyes were blazing with a triumph I hadn't seen in years. "This is it," she announced, thrusting her tablet toward me. The screen showed a breathtaking minimalist apartment. It was all sharp angles, polished concrete, and glass, hovering high above the city lights. It looked more like a museum than a home. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a terrace, and the seller, she paused for dramatic effect, is a Japanese executive. He's being recalled. He's motivated. The word Japanese landed in the quiet garage with the force of a physical blow. My heart stuttered. I stared at the screen, at the cold beauty of the apartment, and then at Sloane's excited face. She saw a perfect investment. I saw a stage. And in that single, dizzying moment, the spark of an idea, both terrifying and irresistible, ignited in my mind. She was so confident in her control, so sure of my ignorance. What if I listened? What if I heard the conversation she thought was happening in a secret room, a room I now held the key to? It's a terrifying feeling, to stand at a crossroads and know that one path leads to the same quiet misery, and the other into the unknown. If you've ever faced a choice that scared you, you know the weight I was carrying. Let me know you're with me in the comments. The decision settled inside me, cold and hard. This wasn't just about listening. It was an act of reconnaissance. For years, I had fought a war without intelligence, always reacting, always on the defensive. Now, I had a chance to go behind enemy lines and learn her true strategy. The guilt was a faint, distant echo, quickly drowned out by the roaring need to know. Was I really about to spy on my own wife? Or was I finally gathering the tools to defend what was left of my family? The morning of the viewing, Sloane was a whirlwind of calculated efficiency. She picked out my clothes, a crisp button-down shirt I never wore, and critiqued my shoes. "We need to look the part, Kenji. Mr. Tanaka is a serious man." I said nothing, just let her sculpt me into the image of the dutiful, simple husband she required for this performance. In the car, she practiced phrases from a language app on her phone. "Kore wa ikura desu ka?" "How much is this?" Her pronunciation was clumsy, transactional. I stared out the window, my own Japanese a silent, perfect recitation in my mind. The building was a spear of glass and steel piercing the sky. The lobby was a cavern of marble and art, so silent our footsteps were swallowed whole. A man in a uniform with white gloves nodded us toward the elevator. Sloane's eyes gleamed with possession. "Now this is what I'm talking about," she whispered, her voice tight with excitement. "This has value." I just felt the immense weight of it all pressing down. The elevator was silent, its walls mirrored. I saw our reflection, Sloane, poised and perfect, and me, the quiet husband beside her. But my eyes in the reflection held a secret. The doors slid open onto the 12th floor, onto plush, sound-absorbing carpet. The air smelled of lemons and money. Sloane rang the bell, and I took a final, deep breath, locking away every trace of understanding behind a mask of polite ignorance. The door opened. The man who stood there was Mr. Tanaka. He was perhaps in his late 50s, with kind, intelligent eyes and a posture of calm grace. He wore a simple, well-tailored sweater and trousers. He bowed slightly. "Hajime mashite," he said. "Nice to meet you." Sloane launched into her rehearsed introduction, her Japanese stilted but functional. "Hajime mashite. Watashi tachi wa Sloane to Kenji desu." She gestured to me. I bowed slightly as I had learned was customary, and said nothing. I offered a small, hesitant smile, the picture of a man out of his depth. "Mr. Yeaston." Tanaka's eyes flickered to me for a moment, a brief, appraising glance, before returning to Sloane. He invited us in. As I stepped over the threshold, I made a silent vow. For the next hour, the man Sloane knew would disappear. In his place would be a ghost, a vessel, absorbing every word, every nuance, every damning truth. The performance was over. The listening had begun. Walking into that apartment, knowing what I was about to do, was the most terrifying step I had ever taken. Your support gives me the strength to keep sharing this. Please, subscribe to silk vengeance stories. What I heard in that apartment, it changed everything. The apartment was a masterpiece of minimalism, every surface gleaming, every line perfectly straight. It felt like a stage set, beautiful but utterly lifeless. Mr. Tanaka welcomed us in with a quiet grace, his movements economical and precise. Sloane immediately took charge, her Japanese flowing more freely now, a river of practiced phrases about the view, the building, the investment potential. I lingered a step behind, my hands shoved in my pockets, playing my part to perfection. As we moved through the spacious entryway, Mr. Tanaka gestured to the custom built-in closet. "Koko wa fukuro no teni ga jubun ni arimasu," he said, explaining there was ample storage for coats. Sloane turned to me, a condescending smile on her lips. "He says the closet is big," she translated, reducing the detailed explanation to a simplistic fragment. I nodded mutely, but inside, a cold knot tightened. It was a small thing, an insignificant omission, but it was a pattern that began to form immediately. In the living room, with its breathtaking panoramic windows, Mr. Tanaka pointed out the triple-paned glass. "Kore wa onkyo o yoku yokusei shimasu," he noted. "This provides excellent soundproofing." "The windows are very thick," Sloane told me, her tone implying I wouldn't understand the concept of soundproofing anyway. We moved to the kitchen, a chef's dream of marble and stainless steel. Mr. Tanaka explained that all the appliances were top-of-the-line German models and would remain. Sloane listened, then said to me, "The fridge and stove are included." Each time, she was stripping away the nuance, the quality, the very soul of what Mr. Tanaka was saying, reducing it to bare utilitarian facts for her simple husband. But the true chill came when Mr. Tanaka, with a hint of pride, showed us the primary bedroom's walk-in closet, illuminated by motion-activated lights. "Koko wa okusan no fukuro ni pitari desu ne," he said with a gentle smile. "This is perfect for the wife's wardrobe." Sloane let out a light, tinkling laugh, a sound she never used with me anymore. She replied to him in rapid Japanese, "Ii watashi no mono desu. Auto no fukuro wa genkan no shosuki de jubun desu." No, these are for me. My husband's clothes are more than sufficient in the small closet by the entrance. Mr. Tanaka gave a polite, slightly uncomfortable nod. Sloane didn't translate a word of this exchange for me. She just smiled and said, "He says the closet is very organized." I felt the heat of humiliation creep up my neck. She wasn't just omitting details. She was actively mocking me, dismissing my very presence in our future home to a stranger. I was to be relegated to a guest closet while she claimed the master suite. The apartment itself seemed to shrink, the walls closing in, each pristine surface reflecting the distorted image of our marriage back at me. This wasn't a home we were buying. It was a kingdom she was claiming for herself, and I was being assigned the quarters of a court jester. The tour continued, a slow-motion dissection of my dignity. In the second bedroom, which Mr. Tanaka used as an office, Sloane immediately began planning its conversion into a proper guest room. There was no mention of Maya, no thought that our daughter might want a space here, a place to stay on weekends. It was as if our existing family was being erased to make way for her sleek, new, child-free life. We returned to the living room. Mr. Tanaka, ever the gracious host, offered tea. Sloane accepted for both of us without consulting me. As he moved to the kitchen, she turned to me, her eyes sharp. "Well, what do you think?" she asked in English, her voice low. "It's very modern," I said cautiously, the understatement of the century. "Modern? Kenji, it's perfect," she corrected, her smile not reaching her eyes. "I've negotiated the initial price already. He's motivated. We just need to settle the final details." She was already speaking as if the deal was done, my role as the silent approver already fulfilled. Mr. Tanaka returned with a tray holding 3 cups of steaming green tea. We sat on the expensive, uncomfortable sofa. The city sprawled beneath us like a promised land I was no longer sure I wanted to enter. The polite conversation continued, and with every sentence Sloane failed to translate. With every dismissive comment she made about me in a language she thought was her private domain, the foundation of our life together crumbled a little more. I was no longer just listening for information. I was an archaeologist of my own ruin, unearthing the evidence one shattered piece at a time. Sitting there, smiling, while inside, everything was breaking. It's a feeling I wouldn't wish on anyone. If you've ever had to hide your pain behind a smile, you know how isolating that is. Let me know you're here with me in the comments. It helps more than you know. The polite conversation over tea shifted, the tone becoming more serious, more transactional. Mr. Tanaka placed his cup delicately on its saucer. "Shomon no koto o hanashimashou ka?" he said. "Shall we discuss the terms of the contract?" Sloane leaned forward, her entire body radiating a focused intensity I recognized from her business calls. "Hai, onegai shimasu," she said. "Yes, please." This was it, the moment I had been waiting for and dreading. Mr. Tanaka explained the asking price. It was a staggering number, one that made my stomach clench. But Sloane didn't flinch. Instead, she launched into a negotiation, her Japanese becoming sharper, more aggressive. She cited market fluctuations, comparable properties, her expertise. She was impressive, I had to admit. And she was doing it all without a single glance in my direction, as if the financial future of our family was her sole domain. Then, Mr. Tanaka, ever the professional, steered the conversation toward the legalities. "Goi chosho o toru tame ni, notary no teisho ga hitsuyo desu," he explained. "We will need a notary to draft the purchase agreement." He paused, then added carefully, "Shomon no kata wa, dono yo ni shimasu ka?" "How would you like to handle the title?" Sloane's response was smooth, rehearsed. "Watashi dake no meimei de," in my name only. The air left my lungs. I kept my face perfectly still, a mask of benign ignorance, but internally I was free-falling. She had said it, so easily, so definitively. Mr. Tanaka's eyebrows lifted almost imperceptibly. He was too polite to show overt surprise, but a flicker of discomfort crossed his features. He glanced at me, then back at Sloane. "So, desu ka," he said slowly. "I see." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Tsuma no bu no hereru yo ni, zei no men de benri na hoho ga arimasu. Watashi wa kono yo na bai. Haigusha dake no meimei ga kantan desu." There are tax-efficient ways to include a spouse's share later. In cases like this, I've found titling in just one spouse's name initially is simpler. He was giving her an out, a graceful, professional way to backtrack, to include me. He was subtly questioning her decision. Sloane didn't take it. She waved a dismissive hand, a gesture I knew all too well. "Kekkon shita toki kara, zaisan wa watashi ga kanrimashita," she stated, as if it were an unchangeable law of nature. "I've managed the assets since we married." Then she delivered the line that would seal our fate, her voice dropping into a confidential, almost conspiratorial tone. "Otto ni wa wakarimasen. Kare wa tanjun na hito desu. Okane no koto yori, musume to jibun no shigoto ni kyomi ga arimasu. Watashi ga kane o harau no de, watashi no mono ni narimasu. Kore de mondai wa arimasen." I heard every syllable with crystal clarity. He doesn't understand. He is a simple man. He's more interested in our daughter and his job than money. Since I'm paying, it will be mine. This isn't a problem. Time stopped. The minimalist apartment, the city skyline, the two people speaking, it all faded into a dull roar. A simple man. The words echoed in the hollowed-out space where my heart used to be. All my hard work, my sacrifices, my quiet endurance, reduced to that. Simplicity, stupidity. She wasn't just cutting me out of a financial asset. She was erasing my contribution, my partnership, my very humanity. Mr. Tanaka did not reply immediately. He took a slow sip of his tea, his eyes downcast. He was a man of honor, and he was clearly uncomfortable. But this was a business transaction, and the buyer, my wife, was stating her terms. "Wakarimashita," he said finally, his voice neutral. "I understand." The conversation moved on. They began discussing timelines, deposits, the involvement of the notary. Sloane was triumphant, energized. She had won. She had secured her kingdom and neatly sidelined the simpleton who shared her name. I sat there, a statue of a man. The teacup in my hand felt like a foreign object. I looked at Sloane, at the elegant line of her neck, the confident set of her shoulders, and I didn't see the woman I loved. I saw a strategist who had just checkmated her opponent and didn't even know the game was over, because the simple man sitting beside her had understood every word. The ghost had heard the plot to bury him, and he was no longer willing to lie down in the grave she had dug. A cold, clear fury began to replace the shock, a glacial calm settling over me. The listening was over. The war was about to begin. I knew what I had to do. I had to let her believe she had succeeded. I had to let her walk out of this apartment believing she held all the power, because the moment we were alone, I was going to take it all away. Hearing those words, sitting there completely still while my world ended, it took everything I had not to scream. The confrontation that came next was the hardest moment of my life. Your support is what allows me to share it. Please, subscribe. What happened when we got home? You won't want to miss it. The drive home was a journey through a silent, alien landscape. Sloane was buoyant, humming along to the radio, her fingers tapping a victorious rhythm on the steering wheel. "You see, Kenji?" she said, finally breaking the silence. "That's how you negotiate. You have to project confidence." He knew I was serious. "We got it for 15,000 under asking." She said, "we," but the triumph was entirely her own. I didn't trust myself to speak. I kept my face turned toward the window, watching the monolithic buildings of the city center give way to the familiar, cramped streets of our neighborhood. Each block we passed felt like a layer of my old life being stripped away. The park where I pushed Maya on the swings, the hardware store where the owner knew my name. It all looked the same, but it was now just a backdrop to a life that had been a lie. "He is a simple man." The sentence played on a loop in my head, each repetition etching it deeper into my soul. It wasn't just an insult, it was a definition. It was the lens through which she had viewed me for years. My contentment was simplicity. My dedication to my family was a lack of ambition. My trust in her was naivete. The clarity was physically painful, a sharp, cold ache behind my ribs. "We'll need to schedule the inspection next week," Sloane continued, already planning our future from her throne. "And I'll contact the notary. He's someone Mr. Tanaka recommended. It should all be very straightforward." She emphasized the last word, a word that now felt like a synonym for "without your knowledge." I simply nodded, a tight, mechanical movement of my head. We pulled into the driveway of the house I'd poured my sweat into. The porch light was on, a light I had installed myself. It felt like looking at a museum exhibit of a life I used to have. We walked inside. The familiar scent of our home, the lemon polish Sloane insisted on, the faint hint of pine from the cleaning supplies, now smelled like decay. Sloane tossed her keys into the ceramic bowl by the door with a flourish. "I'm going to change. Then I need to make some calls. This is really happening." She moved toward the bedroom, already detaching from the moment, from me. This was it. If I waited, if I let the momentum of her plan build, I would be swept away forever. The ghost had to speak. "Sloane." My voice came out quieter than I intended, but it had a strange, new quality to it. A flatness, a finality. She stopped, one hand on the bedroom doorframe, and turned back, a faint look of impatience on her face. "What is it, Kenji?" "I'm busy." I didn't move from my spot in the middle of the living room. I felt like a rock in a river, and the current of her ambition was trying to flow around me. "We need to talk, now." She sighed, a long-suffering exhalation. "Can it wait? I have to—" "No." The word cut through the air, sharp and absolute. "It can't." She blinked, her head tilting slightly. She was noticing the difference now, the absence of the usual plea in my tone, the lack of the slumped shoulders of defeat. I was standing straight, my hands loose at my sides, looking at her not as a supplicant, but as an equal. Or perhaps, for the first time, as an adversary. "Fine," she said, her voice cautious. "What is so important?" She took a few steps back into the room, crossing her arms over her chest, a defensive, impatient posture. I took a slow breath, steadying the storm inside me. I had to be precise. I had to be calm. My anger would only make her dismiss me as emotional. "Before we proceed with the purchase," I began, my voice dangerously level, "I need clarity on one point." I met her gaze and held it. "The title. Whose name exactly will be on the deed? The change in her was instantaneous and telling. A flicker of shock in her eyes, quickly masked by a wave of irritation. Her lips tightened. What are you talking about? Ours, of course. Why would you even ask that? She was lying to my face, smoothly, easily. The performance was seamless. I ask, I said, taking a single step forward, because I want to hear you say it, clearly. Will the deed to the apartment be in both of our names, yes or no? Her composure began to crack. A flush crept up her neck. Kenji, this is ridiculous. You don't understand how these things work. It's complicated. There are tax implications, legal procedures. I understand enough, I interrupted, my voice still quiet, but now laced with the steel she had never heard before. I understand that Mr. Tanaka suggested a structure for the title, and I understand what you told him. The room went utterly still. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Sloane's face was a perfect mask of confusion, but her eyes were starting to dart, searching for an escape route, for the source of this catastrophic intelligence leak. Told him what? She asked, her voice a half octave higher than before. What are you implying? I didn't break eye contact. The ghost was stepping into the light. I'm not implying anything, Sloane. I'm telling you what I heard. Confronting someone you love with their own betrayal is a special kind of hell. The silence in that room after I spoke was heavier than any I'd ever known. If you've ever had to find the courage to speak a painful truth, you know how much it costs. Let me know you're here in the comments. For a long moment, she just stared at me. I could see the calculations happening behind her eyes, the frantic reevaluation of the entire situation. How could I know? How could I have possibly known? Whatever you think you heard, she said, her voice tight with a mixture of fear and fury. You misunderstood. He was speaking Japanese, for God's sake, Kenji. You don't understand a word. I understand enough, I repeated, my voice dropping into a low, calm register that seemed to unnerve her more than shouting ever could. I understand Watashi Dake no Meme. The color drained from her face so completely, it was as if someone had pulled a plug. Her arms, crossed so defensively, fell limp to her sides. She took an involuntary step backward, hitting the doorframe with a soft thud. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The silence was profound. I could hear the ticking of the clock in the hallway, the hum of the refrigerator, the ragged edge of her breath. How? The word was a choked whisper. How could you? How could I understand? I finished for her. I took a step forward, no longer the ghost, but a man made solid and real by the truth. While you were building your empire, Sloane, I was building something too, in the garage, every night, for 8 months. Her eyes widened in dawning, horrific comprehension. The books, the headphones, you weren't just listening to music. I was listening to a language, I said. Grandfather's language. I wanted to understand him, to feel close to him. I never imagined I'd need it to understand my own wife's contempt for me. The word contempt hung in the air between us, ugly and undeniable. It wasn't contempt, she snapped, finding her voice again, lashing out now that her deception was exposed. It was practicality. You said it yourself. You don't care about this stuff. I'm the one who handles the money. I'm the one who understands the market. Putting it in my name first is a strategic decision. We could have added you later for all you know. He is a simple man. I said it in Japanese. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. It was one thing to know I had understood the words. It was another to hear them spoken back to her in the same language, with perfect, quiet pronunciation. It was the sound of her own private thoughts, her secret assessment of me, thrown back in her face. She flinched as if I'd struck her. He is more interested in our daughter and his job than money, I continued, still in Japanese, my gaze never leaving hers. Since I'm paying, it will be mine. I let the words settle, watching her world tilt on its axis. Then I switched back to English, my voice cold and final. You didn't see a husband, Sloane. You saw a simpleton, a convenient fixture. You didn't plan to add me later. You planned to own me completely. You wanted me entirely dependent, trapped in a home that wasn't even mine, forever grateful for the roof you provided. Tears of rage and frustration welled in her eyes, not tears of remorse, but of a plan unraveling. You deceived me, she accused, her finger pointing shakily at me. You spied on me. I stopped a fraud, I corrected her, my voice still terrifyingly calm. You don't get to play the victim here. You don't get to be angry that I uncovered the trap you were setting for me. We stood there, facing each other in the ruins of our marriage. The last 15 years were a pile of ashes between us. The confident, triumphant woman who had walked out of Mr. Tanaka's apartment was gone, replaced by a cornered, exposed stranger, and the simple, quiet man she thought she knew was gone, too. In his place stood someone she didn't recognize at all. Someone who had seen the truth and was no longer afraid of it. The confrontation wasn't over. There would be shouting, tears, legal threats, but the war was already won. In that moment, she knew it, and I knew it. The sentence that shattered everything had also, finally, set me free. The silence after that was the beginning of a new, terrifying reality. What came next, the lawyers, the divorce, fighting for my daughter, was a battle I never saw coming. Your support as I share this is my strength. Please subscribe to Silk Vengeance Stories. My fight for a new life is a story you won't forget. The silence that followed my words was different from all the others that had filled our home. This was not the quiet of dismissal or the hush of resignation. This was the dead, hollow silence of a verdict being rendered. Sloane's face, usually a masterpiece of controlled composure, was a canvas of chaos. Shock, rage, and a dawning, terrifying understanding warred for dominance. You planned this, she finally whispered, the accusation venomous. This was a trap. You set me up. A bitter, humorless sound escaped my lips. No, Sloane, I simply stopped walking into the one you've been building for years. I just finally looked down and saw the pit you were leading me toward. She staggered to the sofa and sank into it, as if her legs could no longer support the weight of her exposed deception. She buried her face in her hands, but I knew they were not tears of guilt. They were tears of fury. The engine of her ambition had seized, and she was sputtering. What happens now? She asked, her voice muffled by her palms. Now, I said, my voice cold and methodical. We unbind our lives. We will not be buying the apartment. I will be contacting Mr. Tanaka personally to inform him. Her head snapped up. You will do no such thing. That deal is mine. I negotiated it. You negotiated it under false pretenses, I stated calmly. You negotiated it with the intent to defraud your spouse. I doubt the courts or Mr. Tanaka would look kindly on that. Or do you want me to explain to him in his native tongue exactly why the deal fell through? The threat landed with precision. The thought of her professional reputation being tarnished, of a respected business contact knowing the sordid details of her marital deceit, was a blow worse than any financial loss. She visibly shrank. You can't do this, she seethed, but the fight was leaking out of her, replaced by a frantic desperation. Kenji, be reasonable. Let's talk about this. We can still buy the apartment. We'll put it in both names. Right from the start. We can fix this. It was the same old song. Be reasonable was her code for capitulate to my will. The we was a hollow pronoun she used when she needed my compliance. There is no we to fix Sloane, I said, and the finality in my voice made her flinch. The foundation is rotten. You saw me as a simpleton, a tool. You don't build a marriage on that. You don't fix it. So what? You want a divorce? She spat, the word hitting the air between us like a poisoned dart. Yes. My answer was immediate, devoid of hesitation. The word felt less like a decision and more like an acknowledgement of a truth that had already come to pass. The word seemed to suck all the air from the room. She stared at me, her eyes wide with a kind of horrified disbelief. She had always held the power, controlled the narrative. Now, the narrative was mine, and it was one she never saw coming. On what grounds? She challenged, a last desperate stand. Because I wanted to simplify a real estate transaction? I'll tell the judge you're being paranoid. You're having a midlife crisis, learning languages in the garage, inventing conspiracy theories. I almost felt sorry for her then. She was so deeply entrenched in her own narrative that she couldn't see the evidence was no longer circumstantial. It was linguistic, and it was absolute. You can tell the judge whatever you want, I replied, my tone weary. I will provide my evidence. I have a record of my language course progress, and I will testify under oath to the exact Japanese phrases you used to describe me to Mr. Tanaka. I wonder how "he is a simple man" will sound in a court transcript. I wonder what a judge will think about a spouse who actively seeks to disinherit their partner. The last of her color drained away. The legal reality was dawning on her. This wasn't a marital squabble. This was premeditated financial betrayal, and I was a witness who could testify fluently to every damning word. You'd air our dirty laundry in public? You'd humiliate me? Humiliate us? Her voice was a strained thread. You humiliated me in a stranger's living room, Sloane, I said, my voice low and sharp. You did that. I'm just making sure the truth sees the light of day. Now, I think it's best if you pack a bag. You can stay at your sister's. We can discuss the next steps through our lawyers. I turned and walked toward the kitchen, needing to put physical distance between us before the tremors I was suppressing became visible. The performance of strength was exhausting. I heard a strangled sound behind me, a mix of a sob and a scream. Then the sound of her storming into the bedroom and the violent slam of the door. The house shook with her rage. I stood at the kitchen sink, my hands gripping the cool ceramic, and looked out into the dark yard. I had won the battle. I had taken back my power, my voice, my future. But the victory felt hollow, surrounded by the wreckage of a life I had once cherished. The reckoning had come, and it had left nothing standing. Standing in that kitchen, listening to the sounds of my life falling apart, I felt completely alone. The path ahead was terrifying. If you've ever stood in the ruins of everything you know the courage it takes to take the next step. Your support means I don't have to walk it alone. Please subscribe. The sound of drawers slamming and closet doors hitting the walls echoed through the house for the next half hour. I didn't move from the kitchen. I poured a glass of water, but my hand shook so badly I could barely drink it. The adrenaline was receding, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight on my chest. I was mourning, not just the end of my marriage, but the death of the dream it had once been. The man I thought I was married to had never existed. The bedroom door flew open again. Sloane stood there, a large suitcase in tow, her face a hard mask of composed fury. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, glittering resolve. This isn't over, Kenji, she stated, her voice clipped and precise. You think you're so clever? You have no idea what you've started. I will not be pushed out of my own home. It's my home too, I said quietly, still leaning against the sink. And right now, for the sake of what's left of our sanity, we need space. You leaving is the most reasonable first step. Reasonable? She let out a sharp, brittle laugh. You've been secretly scheming for months, and you want to talk to me about reasonable? She wheeled her suitcase toward the front door, then stopped, her hand on the knob. She turned back, her eyes narrowing. Maya. We need to talk about Maya. My heart clenched into a tight, protective fist. There is nothing to talk about. She is my daughter. I am her father. That will never change. We'll see what the courts say about that, she said, and the threat was so casual, so weaponized, that it stole the air from my lungs. A stable home environment is crucial. A judge will be very interested in your recent deceptive behavior, your secretive projects in the garage, your instability. She was already building her case, painting me as the unstable, secretive one, while positioning herself as the wronged, stable provider. The audacity of it, the sheer, breathtaking inversion of reality, left me speechless for a moment. I pushed away from the counter, my own anger finally breaking through the numb grief. You will not use our daughter as a pawn in this, Sloane. I will fight you with everything I have. I will tell the court exactly why this marriage ended. I will make sure they understand the kind of stability you were trying to build, a world where her father is a tenant in his own life. We stared at each other from across the living room, a new, more terrifying battlefield opening between us. "I'll be in touch through my lawyer," she said finally, yanking the door open. "Don't try to contact me, and don't you dare fill Maya's head with lies." "The only one who has been living a lie is you," I said, but the door was already slamming shut, the sound final and absolute, like a gunshot in the quiet house. The silence that descended was immense. I stood alone in the center of the room, listening to the echo of her car starting and driving away. The fight was over for now, but the war for my future, for my daughter, had just begun. I walked through the empty house, the spaces feeling both familiar and alien. I stopped at the doorway to Maya's room. She was at a friend's for a sleepover, a small mercy. I looked at her neatly made bed, the stuffed animals on the shelf, the drawing of our family taped to the mirror, a drawing with 3 smiling stick figures, holding hands, a relic from a forgotten era. The tears came then, hot and silent. They weren't for Sloane. They were for the family portrait that was now being torn in half. They were for the conversations I would now have to have, for the confusion and pain I would see in my little girl's eyes. I went to the garage, my sanctuary. I didn't turn on the main light, just the small lamp over my chair. My textbooks and my grandfather's diary were there. I picked up the diary, the soft, worn leather cool against my skin. I had learned his language to understand his past, and in doing so, I had salvaged my own future. I had no idea what the coming months would hold. The legal battles would be brutal, a draining marathon of paperwork and negotiations. The loneliness would be a constant companion. The fear of losing time with Maya would be a shadow over every day. But as I sat there in the quiet glow, I realized something. For the first time in years, I was not afraid of Sloane. I was not afraid of her disapproval, her condescension, her plans. The power she had held over me was broken the moment I understood her words. The simple man was gone. In his place was a father, a fighter, a man who had looked into the abyss of his own life and decided to climb out. The road ahead was dark and uncertain, but it was my road, and I would walk it for myself and for my daughter. Starting over from scratch, especially when a child is involved, is the hardest thing a person can do. The divorce, the fight for custody, it tested me in ways I never imagined. If you believe in second chances and the strength of a father's love, please subscribe to Silk Vengeance Stories. My fight for a new life is a story you helped me tell. The days after Sloane left passed in a blur of grim necessity. The first call I made was to Mr. Tanaka. My voice was raw as I explained in his language that the deal was off due to irreconcilable personal circumstances. I apologized for wasting his time. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Keisha-san," he said, his voice gentle, "I am not surprised, and I am deeply sorry. I felt uncomfortable after your visit. I should not have entertained such a one-sided arrangement." His apology was a balm I didn't know I needed. "You are not to blame," I assured him. "You were conducting business. The fault was in the deception brought to your doorstep." "Your Japanese is excellent," he remarked, a note of genuine admiration in his voice. "You have a good ear." Then he surprised me. "The apartment, it is still for sale. If you were to find yourself in a position, on your own, the offer would stand. I would be willing to work with you." The idea was so monumental, so terrifyingly audacious, that I could barely process it. Buy that apartment? By myself? I don't have that kind of capital, Tanaka-san. My wife, she managed our finances. I am a construction foreman. "Banks exist for a reason," he replied calmly. "And a foreman is a position of great responsibility, stability. Think about it. There is no pressure. The door is open." We ended the call, and his words echoed in the empty house. The door is open. It was the first crack of light in what felt like an impenetrable darkness. The divorce process was a cold, mechanical unraveling. As I had predicted, Sloane fought, but the evidence of her intent, my detailed testimony of the conversation, corroborated by my proven fluency, made her position weak. Her lawyer advised settlement. We divided our assets, including the sale of our marital home. The money from my half of the equity was a staggering sum, enough for a solid down payment, but not enough to buy a penthouse outright. But I didn't want a penthouse. I wanted a home. Simultaneously, I began looking for a new job. The international company where I applied was impressed not by my construction experience alone, but by the combination of my practical skills and my self-taught Japanese. They needed a project manager who could interface with their Japanese partners. The salary they offered was more than I had ever earned. It felt like the universe, after years of pushing me down, was finally offering a hand up. I called Mr. Tanaka back. "I would like to try," I said. He was true to his word. He lowered the price, not out of pity, but as a professional courtesy between two people who respected each other. "You are a serious man, Kesha-san. I am happy to sell my home to you." The mortgage process was daunting, a labyrinth of paperwork I navigated with a determined focus I hadn't known I possessed. But with my new job contract, my solid credit, and the substantial down payment, the bank approved the loan. The day I signed the final papers and received the keys, I drove to the glass tower alone. I let myself into the empty, silent apartment. The panoramic view was still there, but it no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a promise. This was not Sloane's trophy. It was my fortress. It was the solid ground I had nearly lost forever. Taking that step, signing those papers alone, was the most empowering and terrifying moment of my life. Starting over is a leap of faith. If you believe in rebuilding and second chances, let me know in the comments. Your stories give me strength too. I didn't fill the apartment with minimalist furniture or cold modern art. I filled it with us. Maya's room was the first I finished, painting it the sky blue she'd always wanted, filling it with her books and the stuffed animals from our old house. The large second bedroom became a shared office and art space, with a big, durable table for her projects and my drafting plans. The balcony became our garden, with pots of herbs and flowers we tended to together on Sunday mornings. The first night we stayed there, just the two of us, Maya looked out the huge windows at the glittering city below. "It's so high up, Daddy," she whispered, her small hand in mine. "It is," I said, squeezing her hand. "It means we can see all the possibilities." The divorce was finalized. The war was over. The quiet that settled in our new home was not the silence of before. It was a peaceful, comfortable quiet, punctuated by the sound of Maya's laughter, the sizzle of food in our new kitchen, and the soft turning of pages as I continued to read my grandfather's diaries, now understanding them completely. My new job was a challenge I embraced, using my Japanese to communicate with partners, to understand the nuances of their requests, gave me a sense of accomplishment that went beyond a paycheck. I was no longer just a foreman. I was a bridge, a facilitator. The respect I received was not for the wife I had, but for the work I did and the man I was. One evening, after a video conference with our team in Hiroshima, a colleague, Julian, lingered after the call. "That was expertly handled, Kenji," he said. "The way you clarified the specifications saved us weeks of potential delays." We started talking, first about work, then about books, then about our lives. He was kind and he listened. There was no performance, no hidden agenda. It was just a conversation. Months later, on a warm evening, Julian and I sat on the balcony, the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Maya was inside, happily watching a movie. He looked at me, his expression soft. "You've built a beautiful life here, Kenji. For you and Maya, it's impressive." I looked around at our home, at the evidence of our happiness everywhere. "I just built a foundation," I said. "A real one this time." A year to the day after I heard the sentence that shattered my old world, I stood at the window, Maya asleep in her room. The city lights twinkled like a field of fallen stars. I thought of the long, painful path that led here, the betrayal, the confrontation, the fear, the grueling legal battles. But those memories no longer had sharp edges. They were lessons. They were the fuel that had powered my escape. I wasn't the simple man Sloane had described. I was a father, a provider, a student, a survivor. I had taken the shattered pieces of a life built on sand and used them to lay a foundation of granite. The future was no longer a terrifying unknown. It was a blank canvas, and for the first time, I held the brush. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Julian. Just checking in. Hope you and Maya had a good day. I smiled, looking out at the endless, glowing horizon. Ahead was a whole life, my life, and I was finally, truly ready to live it. This channel, Silk Vengeance Stories, is built on tales of quiet strength and powerful redemption. If my story helped you, or if you have your own story of finding light after darkness, share it in the comments below. We are a community here. Your support has been my anchor, and please subscribe for a new story of resilience and hope every single day. Thank you for walking this path with me.